Love on Campus acknowledges that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage and beliefs and relationship with this land. We acknowledge that these lands are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations people.
Welcome to Love on Campus, to one of our summer footnotes. I'm Associate Professor Amy Matthews, and I'm here today with my co-host Georgia Nichols.
Hello.
And we're really lucky today that we get to interview our top 10 Australian best-selling romance writer, Rachael Johns.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here because I have loved your podcast from the moment I heard about it. But then when I first listened, I was hooked.
I reckon you were one of our first listeners because you sent me a message and I was like, oh, this is the first feedback I've had.
Oh, really? That's so cool. No, it was very
big supporter. It's been the best.
Yeah, and Rachael has also launched a podcast now called Dear Rach and Soph, which I listened to today and I recommend. So you can hit that up on Spotify, all you podcast listeners.
You're very casual.
I'm all for casual. Anyway, we're here today to talk about Rachel's new book, The Other Bridget, which has a really amazing premise. It's kind of a few premises. So it's about a librarian who's named Bridget Jones.
Yep.
As like the Bridget Jones we all know and love. And we will circle back to this at the end because George is just reading Bridget Jones for the first time.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot going on in this book because it is quite meaty women's fiction. So it's romantic, it's fun, but there's also a couple of moments where I cried, I have to say. So yeah, we'll circle back around and talk about the book. But first of all, I wanted to know where the origin story of the book came from.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think it's three places when I think back on it now. The first one is actually from a book a couple of years ago that I was writing called Outback Secrets. And I wrote 30,000 words, wasn't working. I felt sick. I just was like, I can't make this work. But I had to keep the hero because it's from another book. But I just ditched the first sort of love interest. And then I wrote again, and this one was 35,000 words before I started feeling sick and ditched that.
Oh, no.
I know, it was the worst. I lost 65,000 words and it was just, I thought, I can't do this. This is the end. But that second love interest was a librarian in a small town. And I had her named Bridget, not Bridget Jones, but I'd had her named Bridget because her mum loved the book Bridget Jones' Diary and she was reading in hospital and she'd named all of her kids after fictional characters that she'd loved. So I had her and I had that she had the superpower of being able to turn non-readers into book lovers. But I had to ditch her because she just wasn't working for that story. And, I then, I guess, kind of forgot about her. And then the other thing, I've always loved Bridget Jones' Diary from the first book to the three that came after and the movies, everything about them. So that was always there, I guess, but I never thought I'm going to write about this. And then I do writing sprints with my friend who's also in South Australia, you guys. And she and I probably write about 4 or 5 times a day. We do half an hour slots and then we report back into each other so we don't, check email and all that in that time. And one time a year or so ago, she was like, oh, I didn't do anything in that time because I'd been playing phone tennis with the hospital and she'd got a message from a, text message when you say here's an appointment for her 16-year-old son about a psychiatrist appointment at the hospital. It was the first that she ever knew, we need to see a psychiatrist. So she's a bit confused. And in the end, it turned out that it was for someone, he'd been to the hospital for something else, and it was for someone with exactly the same name as her son, exactly the same birth date.
Wow.
How she'd actually got, So it was for the other and then her son's name. And I just thought, oh, the other somebody or other, the other, that's sort of a cool title, like the other Amy Matthews and I just suddenly, those three things, because it was very quick, so I don't know if I remembered my character from before or I looked up and saw my Bridget Jones, things, but those three things sort of came together. So it was the title. I find that if you've got a really strong title for a book, whether it might change down the track, but it really helps me with the writing process.
Yeah, I feel the same way. If I can get a really strong title, and half of them have been ditched, they've not been kept.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Let's have it while you're writing the story.
Yeah, something about having the concept, it distills the concept down into something really strong.
Yeah, I'm not good at the like one sentence pitch or whatever, but the title like in some ways does that almost.
Yeah.
Because it gives it the flavour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then because we're based at a university and we often talk about the odd fit sometimes of writing commercial fiction and romance and the university system, I was really curious because I know this story and I just think it's such an amazing story about your experience of a creative writing program, because I know you did do creative writing at university.
Yeah, I did one in WA, and I'm just trying to work. It would have started in '98. Then I had a bit of a gap year. So that just sort of gives you an idea of when it happened, because I do think, hopefully, and you guys would know this more than me, that the programs are a lot better now. This was relatively new in terms of writing.
Creative writing was very new in universities in the 90s, like brand new.
Yeah, so I think they were still feeling their way, working out, and it was very much, well, my experience was very much, if you're not writing something that's serious literary fiction that might, have the potential to win the Booker Prize or a Pulitzer, or poetry was fine, then, you're not really a writer. And what are you kind of doing here? So nobody was admitting to writing like commercial fiction. It was, we all had these, high pie in the sky, airy fairy kind of hopes. And I had no idea really what I was writing. I think part of the issue with my degree was them and part of it was me. So the issue with them is that we didn't learn anything actually about writing books. It was all just, very, very airy fairy. That's kind of the only word. Like we didn't learn about structure or conflict or, tension, all of the things that since I have learned through reading and through going to other courses and talking to authors and stuff, none of that was actually taught. It was all kind of, let's write a story, and like not really any structure.
Yeah.
So I think that was really a big problem. So the two things were, I didn't think I should be writing commercial kind of fiction or romance. Thought I should be writing something serious, and that wasn't me. So you should always kind of be writing, I think, in the zone where you love, and if And the other problem was, as I said, they weren't teaching really anything about writing, which I hope those two things have changed now. I hope there's a bit more structure to the course, and I also hope that all kinds of fiction are accepted. But to be fair on them, I wasn't a big reader in high school. Like literally, I barely read anything in high school. And as you guys would both know, to be a writer, you have to be a reader. So I feel like I was kind of behind the ball on a lot of that. I was finding.
Well, looking at the bookshelves behind you right now, you seem to have caught up.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are unread. I'm trying to catch up.
It's a sign of a real reader.
I do wish I'd read more in high school, because, all that time on my hands spent crushing on boys instead of
which was also research.
Yeah, exactly.
That helped.
I wasn't a reader in high school either.
Really?
I didn't start really until first year uni getting into reading.
So
is that because you were not handed the right books, do you think?
Yeah, I also want to know. Yeah, and I think mine was a bit like that. I think there was. I think the books that most you really make you read in high school, a lot of them aren't accessible for adults. Most adults, never mind, teenagers. But I also think there's a lot of distractions and other, things going on. But yeah, I'm really curious. What was obviously you're doing your PhD or master's now, is that right?
Yeah, PhD. I don't
know.
The book that got me back into reading was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So it's not even commercial fiction.
But you read, like, when you talked to Georgia, you were reading a lot of like Christina Lauren's Sweet Dirty Boy and stuff.
I was. So maybe it's the fact that I didn't associate all of the romance reading I was doing with
actual reading.
Yeah, because there was a certain emphasis on these literary novels.
Yeah.
Those books for me were hidden away. Like they were always read on my phone, and they were.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so I don't know, but I got more voracious with it in university, maybe the idea, and more open about it.
Definitely the same.
But I don't know that it's always has changed that much in all institutions. Do you know, I think there still is a stress on, and there's this kind of weird romantic tradition idea that it's an art form, not an industry. And I think a lot of what's actually really helpful craft stuff is based on it being an industry rather than just an art form.
That's so true. Like, and I guess with art, can you teach it, or is it just like, scared to teach too specifically because that's taking away from people's.
Can you imagine if you hired an architect that had been taught that way, that it's an art and it's, we don't actually want to teach you the engineering side. We don't want to hinder your creativity.
So true. Yeah, that's hilarious.
So Georgia has heaps of questions for you because she's currently writing the first draft of her first novel.
Yeah, so I'm very tunnel vision at the moment. So I suppose my question is how you approach it, in terms of how clean do you try to keep your first draft? How many drafts follow that?
Interesting. Yeah, I think I'm quite different to a lot of people in that I hear so many people they race through their first draft, and I always think that sounds so good. They should be doing that. They get all the bare bones down and then they go back and they finesse it with each draft and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I have learnt that I can't work that way. So I do have a fairly clean draft. I pretty much go back and forth as I'm writing, and I'm feeling I now know. I'm not woo-woo in any other aspect of my life, which I'm not. That's fine if you are, but I just am not. But in writing, I really am. I kind of really now follow how I'm feeling and listen to my gut rather than necessarily what I think I should, my brain. And so I do a lot of rewriting as I go, and so I'm feeling the story. I'm just starting a new book at the moment, and I'm thinking a lot about I'm writing stuff down because I feel like I should be doing pre-work, kind of thing. Yeah. But I think what Amy and I discussed on the podcast a couple of weeks ago is it's a lot about thinking beforehand and just giving yourself permission and the time to sort of let those characters take place. I don't know everything about everything going in. I've got a hero at the moment or a male love interest that I'm like, well, he's got an issue, but is that deep enough, and why, and so I'm really trying to ask myself questions about who the characters are and why. And then, so I do edit mostly as I go. And of course, then you have the edits with the publisher too. And I think looking back, I'm sure, Amy, you've changed, the more books you write, and also obviously it changes when you've got a contract before you've actually sometimes written, But I'm guessing when I was writing my first book, I may have done, my process might have been slightly different. Obviously, I would now submit something that probably I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone who's submitting their first book to submit, because I have a relationship. You're probably saying, I've got a relationship with the publisher and my editor, and they know that I can put in the work to bring something up to a different level, and sometimes I just need that feedback.
Yes.
I feel like if you're submitting your first book, you don't want to be getting that feedback really from editors and publishers. You want to have got that feedback from, whether it's beta readers or critique partners or some way, and really make sure that the book you're giving is the best you can do at the time. That makes sense. So,
I think that's great advice, because
I agree.
They just don't have the time to read work that's not going to grab them.
Yeah,
they do read after hours and on weekends, and so it needs to be the best book it can be to get their attention, I think.
Yeah,
but it's true. If you're working on a deadline, like now, my last book, I was on such a tight deadline. I really did send off the first draft.
Yeah,
and I was like, you just have to trust me that I'll make it better.
yeah, and that's the thing. I think they. Once you've worked with someone for a while, you've got a bit of a history, then they're more likely to do that. But they're not going to trust a first time. Even to be honest, I've just changed publishers, and my publisher, the new publisher, bought me on nothing. It was just we wanted to work together, and and then the idea for Bridget came up, and she's like, yep, love the sound of that. Well, I was actually going to write something else first, but it sort of jumped the queue. And she actually admitted to me once she read the first draft that I submitted, she was really relieved, because you never know when you are writing with someone new, has the previous publisher done a lot of work to make what you see, or but also I guess it's the same with a new author. They're not going to necessarily put the effort in unless the story is there's something so amazing there. So you really want to put your best work forward. Yeah.
Do you have more questions about drafting?
Well, I think that was so helpful.
Oh, was
it? I think I've always it really was, because I think I work in the same way. I really like to polish and edit as I write. I can't not.
And sometimes do you feel that you shouldn't be doing that? Because I do.
Yeah, I do. I feel like I
out
shouldn't
there.
look back.
Yeah.
And that I should just try and
You
hit
really
it.
have to follow your own gut and your own process.
Mm.
I think it's called looping. I've got a book that I saw it in, but one like writing teacher, I don't know if it was James Scott Bell or somebody else, I can't remember now, but he calls it looping. Now where he says that you go write 500 words, then go back to the previous 500 and kind of, that's very specific, and that might not work for everyone, but that's what I do basically. But I go back a lot further. I reread quite constantly, and a lot of people are like, no, don't reread, just get to the end.
Oh, no, I reread. I always reread the last chapter before I start for the day.
Yeah, exactly. So do I.
I actually reread a bit further, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I got to the stage where I was starting to reread almost the whole book.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's skim reading, but I'm a slow reader, and you read snatches here and there, but that if you've got 100,000 words and it can take 3 hours to read.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem when you have all the time in the world, like I do now in some ways, because this is my full-time job. I don't have another job like you or anything. So I'm like, I'll just take all this time. And then suddenly you're like, I've wasted all that time. Whereas if you have to fit it into a certain amount of time, you're more likely to be sort of focused.
I was going to ask you about that because I was listening to Dear Rach and Soph where you talked about that, about going full-time and the challenges that comes with, because it's true, you do meet a lot of readers or writers who say that must be the total dream to have all the time in the world, and I'm just hanging out. I will write my novel when I have all the time. So what were the challenges you found when you went full-time as a writer?
I think the biggest one is that, I was much more I'm disciplined now, I would say, because I have to be. I've learned that, but before it would be I might have an hour a day, or I'd have to do it in the evenings, and it would be, even if I didn't want to do it, like it was also a joy kind of thing, because it wasn't my full-time job kind of thing, and so it was like, this is my fun, where someone else might watch TV or I don't know, go skydiving or whatever. Escaping onto the page for me was a joy, and I think one of the biggest challenges going full-time was that I had to now rely on that joy to pay my bills and stuff. And I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert that says you should never actually make your passion your full-time job or your work, because it's when it adds a pressure that doesn't necessarily help with your creativity. So that's one of the things. And the other thing is definitely, all the time, I'm just not the type of writer that is going to be able to write like 10 hours a day. So instead of, it's trying to make them work out how you do this and protect the times that you need to write and sort of things like that. But I think the other issue, so it's a bit of a stress because you have to pay your way, and that makes, but I think the other issue is it's very easy then to be so insular, and when you've got to go out to a job, you're talking to other people, you're meeting people, you're having to get dressed up to go to work. You're doing a lot of other things, you're seeing, and I just feel that you have to work hard to make sure you do other things as well. Whereas if you've got another job, you're automatically doing something else. Whereas it's very easy just to be focused on the writing and forget the world exists, and you need the rest of the world to sort of help refill the well and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you often see writers who've gone full-time, all their main characters are suddenly writers.
Yes, exactly. Because they don't know anything else.
I do think about that a lot. I think about how sorry, I was just going to say, I think about how so many characters in books are always writers or something creative and like humanities based, because that's just what a lot of us know.
It used to be, I don't know, I mean, do you remember when it always used to be that publishers didn't want anything like that? They never wanted to.
But now books are fashionable.
Every second book is about that. But I think with on the whole becoming a writer and whether or not to make it your full-time job, I think a lot of people think, you're living the dream, and but a dream, any job is never going to be, you're not going to love it all the time, no matter what you do. So I think you have to work hard to remember why you're doing it, and to maintain the love that you had before you had to do it, if that makes sense.
Even though I do it for enjoyment, there's part of me that still finds it really difficult and has these moments where I go, this I don't really want to do this right now.
I think because a novel's a slog.
Yeah, exactly. I remember also, because I remember there was times just briefly before I got my first contract, I was thinking because I did want to do it. I've told everyone I want to do this, and this was my dream. But then I was forcing myself to do it, like, you know, when I might be able to relax or do something else. I thought, well, I was feeling guilty almost if I would, watch a movie or hang out with people, because I'm thinking, well, if I really want this, I should be writing. And so it becomes almost a guilt thing. So I can totally relate to you. Think, oh, I should be doing this. So that takes the element of joy out of it.
Anytime I do anything but write, I feel guilty.
Exactly. And, you know, that's not, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad, but I do think, you know, you shouldn't feel bad about writing, not necessarily loving it. Like, I know so many writers. I think Amy Andrews did a post, I think.
It was in Heart's Talk.
Yeah. About, I don't love writing, you know, and it's not necessarily the act of writing that I love either. It's, you know, a whole load of other, you know, coming up with character ideas, a thought of a story. It's a bit like running, I always say, you know, like, I don't want to do it before I do it. During it, it's hard. Afterwards, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Happy I've done
it.
We're running out of time, but I thought I'd ask you a question. We didn't get into the weeds of the book, but if anyone's interested, there's some great interviews with Rachael out there, and I'd recommend DS, Rach and Soph, because you do go into the Bridget Jones a little bit in the first episode. But your character, the other Bridget, is really good at recommending books for people. Have you got a book rec for us? Anything you've read recently that you think everyone should read?
I need to remember this because, you know, whenever anyone asks, I don't know about you, if anyone asks what's your favourite book or whatever, because suddenly you can't think of any book you've ever read.
No favourite book, just what you've read recently that you recommend.
Recently, I'll say what's on my desk that I'm really excited about.
Hey, give me right.
But what I have read, what I just finished listening to, is that counts as reading? I know there's a debate out there, is Lola in the Mirror by Trent Dodds.
By Trent.
I'm about to start reading that for book club.
So good. Like, and I must admit, I didn't love Boy Swallows Universe or anything like I was one of, but Lola, it's just amazing. It cements him such an incredible writer. Like, and I was the tension in that book. It's like you think it's be okay, and suddenly it's not okay. And the other book I've just finished reading is Funny Story by Emily Henry.
You've got an advanced copy.
Oh my God, I wish.
And?
Look, it's not my favourite Emily Henry, I would say.
What is your favourite?
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, my favourite actually is People You Meet on Vacation. Or
I love that one. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a thing, like, I feel like she can, she's such an amazing writer, and I have loved all of her books to some, extent. That I think now, I don't know if I'm suffering a bit of, I expect too much, like other writers who I really, really love, I go in on a much higher sort of feel. I think, oh, this is going to be amazing, and then my expectations are not necessarily met. Whereas if I'd gone in going, oh yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I enjoyed it. She writes amazing banter, and it's but it's quite a quiet story. I actually thought it was really interesting because often I worry, is there enough plot in my book, and have they got complicated backstory and all that stuff? And I think what Emily Henry does really well is she digs deep into sort of emotion, but it's not necessarily really tragic or big. It's just the feelings that we sort of feel on every. And just to make that work. So I think she's an expert.
We taught one of the Bridgerton books. Which one was it? Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, the Colin and Penny book. And last semester, and the line about that, I think, is it's just nice people being nice to each other. It's like the whole book.
Mr. Bridgerton, is it?
Yeah, so it's the one that the current season is like Penelope and Colin.
Would you say
it's just it's just nice. It's just nice people being nice
and there's not
other.
even really
there's no real conflict.
There's no complication, really.
No, it's just
it's amazing that some writers can do that. Like, and you think, we're told conflict.
Yeah.
Read someone's book and they manage to write a book that's actually quite good without it, and you're like,
but the quiet book is a nice way to say it. And sometimes you want a bit of quiet.
Yeah,
you just want to go.
The question is, would it have worked as her first book though?
And
does it work it's in the series?
That's true. Like question. I was actually thinking that myself. Hopefully,
you already love them
not listening because I really.
It's still fabulous.
I was thinking, like, it's true, and even what we're talking about your first book, you have to go in so much stronger than like. Not that any of us want to rest on our laurels, and we try and make every book the best we can, right, Amy? But I do think you do have. it's a little bit easier to get past, editors and publishers when you've got a track record. With a book that probably wouldn't have, necessarily knocked any editors off their socks had it been your first. Yeah.
That's really good advice.
It is.
Anyway, thanks for joining us.
No
We've had so
pressure.
much fun.
Yeah.
No pressure, Georgia. We'll check in with her next week and see how she's surviving. She's almost finished the book, by the way. She's on the epilogue, the final
Oh,
chapter.
excellent. Good luck.
Until then, if anyone wants to catch up with Rachael Johns, The Other Bridget is out now. It's just hit the top 10 bestseller lists in Australia, so hurry up or you'll miss out on your first printing. And thank you for joining us, Rach. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thanks for your fabulous podcast. Can't wait to hear more.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.